What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In the last few videos, we set up a Proxmox backup server and even cover how to backup and restore our Proxmox host config using PBS. If you haven't seen those videos yet, I'll add a link to them in the description box below so you can go check it out. Now, one of the main reasons I set up a backup server was to prepare for some hardware upgrades that I have to do on my dev server. So in this video, we're going to take a look at my current environment and talk about why I'm upgrading some of the hardware. This is going to be a more practical look at storage in Proxmox. I have already covered or have already made a video that covers setting up storage in Proxmox, but this video goes a little deeper. We'll be replacing some hard drive and configuring them step by step. Chapters are listed below. You can jump to whatever interests you the most. Let's go ahead. Let's get started. Before we get started, let's take a look at my environment as a whole first, just so you can see how everything fits together. But for this video, just keep in mind that our main focus is going to be on storage and why I'm upgrading my storage. I want to walk you guys through my current setup and the logic behind why I'm restructuring my storage on my dev server the way I am. The approach I'm using here is specific to my dev environment and the goal I'm trying to achieve. So please don't feel like you have to copy it exactly. Just think of it more as a reference point. So the Dell PowerEdge is my dev server or my dev environment, and the Aerostat WTI Pro is my prod server or my prod environment. The dev server is completely segregated from the rest of my internal network at the network level. Like I said earlier, this is where I test new setup, create videos for the YouTube channel, and validate the concept I'm building or learning before implementing them on my prod server, which is the Aerostat WTI Pro. Mistakes are allowed to happen on the dev server or in the dev environment. That's the whole point of having this dev environment. But what I don't want is that I do not want those mistakes to carry over to the other parts of my network, including my, prod server. It's very similar to what you see in a professional environment. Dev is for testing and prod is for solid work. I really wanted to mimic that, and that's why you see that my lab is structured that way. And because this is my dev server, the Dell PowerEdge, I do not put too much focus on high availability or redundancy and all those other things like I do my prod server. That's very important because the storage setup is going to reflect that, and I want you guys to keep that in mind before we start configuring things. Another thing is that I had to flash the RAID controller into IT mode so Proxmox could see all of my drives individually. I didn't make a video about that. Maybe I will at some point, but it was a necessary step to get full visibility of all of the disks that are available on the server. Originally, I had no plans to upgrade anything on this server. My goal was pretty simple: just keep building on the server until you completely burn it out. But now I'm starting to run into an issue where some of the VMs, especially the ones with GUI and even a few terminal-based ones, are starting to run a little bit slow. And that makes sense because everything is still running off of the old SAS drive that came with the server. So I've decided to upgrade a few of the drives to speed things up a little bit. So here's the thing. Again, my main goal here is to squeeze as much life as I possibly can out of this server until it dies. Because I honestly and truthfully don't want to go buying a new server when I don't need to. I have an old server, it works still. If it doesn't work, then I understand, but it still works. My goal, squeeze as much as I can out of it. Just make it a little bit faster. Squeeze, and again, this is my dev environment, right? Squeeze as much life as I can out of it. And then once it dies, migrate things over to a new and fancy server. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that my VMs and my configs are all being backed up now for the dev environment. So I don't need high redundancy or high availability at the hardware level for this environment. I just want something that's a little fast and more efficient, or a little efficient, and will let me keep building until the server crashes or the server dies. Now, I know that was a long explanation to explain the reasoning behind things, but I really want you guys to keep these things in mind as we move forward, because a lot of the storage decisions I'm making in this video are based on that logic. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best move for your own environment. My production server is set up completely differently, but this server, which is my dev server, in this environment is meant to be focused on building and getting as much as I can out of the server. Well, now that you understand my logic, my very long logic behind things, let's go ahead let's take a look at the server, let's replace some drives, and well, let's go have some fun. All right, so this is what the server looks like. It's a pretty old server, like I said earlier. It's nothing new. I've had this server for like a long time. And for what I'm trying to build in a dev environment, as I said, this is way more than enough. Nothing too crazy, not the latest and greatest. It has about 190 something gigs of RAM. It has 2 Intel Xeon CPU, 8 core each, so 16 core. Not too crazy, but again, more than enough. This is the RAID controller. The RAID controller, like I said earlier, is flash so that Proxmox can see all of my drives individually. This is pretty much what it looks like on the inside. And as we move on to the side here, you can see we have about 8 SAS drive. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Also, if you move up to the top a little bit, you notice that I have a SAS connector here that's connected to where the CD drive is supposed to be. What I did was that I got one of these caddies and I set up an SSD in there, and this is where Proxmox is running. So Proxmox is running basically on this guy. And also this is what I'm going to technically use when it comes to storing ISOs and things like that. It's going to, it run Proxmox, but it's also going to be the storage for the ISOs and things like that. So what I've decided to do, I'm going to put this back in, and I'll connect that in a minute. What I've decided to do is I have this drive kind of laying around here. So I have 2 SSD, both of which are kind of 4 TBs. Not kind of, but they're actually 4 TBs. So 4 TB each, right? And then these are going to be the first 2. So I'm going to set this up here. I also have to get an adapter because the SSD is not as big, obviously, as the HDD drive or the SAS drive. So you have to get an adapter to sit in the tray, and I'll show you guys that in a minute so you can connect it in there. So ideally what I'm going to do, and I also have like 3 Toshiba drives here. These are going to replace 3 of these guys because these guys are pretty old. It came initially when he came, and I've used these guys for like such a long time. Initially when he came with this guy right here. These are SAS drive, 4 TB each, extremely old. I've used them for such a long time, and I'm trying to replace them now for something a little bit better. Not too crazy, but just something a little bit better. So these 2 are going to be mostly for the VM OS, and these ones are going to be for data, and I'm going to talk about that in after we're done upgrading the drives, or after we're done replacing the drives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave 3 of this in there for now. So 1, 2, 3. These are going to stay, and I'll talk about my logic behind leaving them there. It's just going to sit there for testing. If I want to upgrade drives, I would do that with this. There's 3 extra drives here, and then for this 3, I'm going to replace this with this guys, and then for this 2, I'm going to replace this with this guys. So let's go ahead and let's start setting things up. So again, this is what it looks like on the front right now. Let's go ahead and start removing things and start configuring things. But again, the server is not too fancy. It's a pretty old server, but it's way more than enough for what I'm doing in the environment, in the dev environment, for when I'm building on Proxmox and all these other things that I'm putting together, and all the videos that I'm making and all the tests that I'm running. This is more than enough right now. And again, as I said, my goal is to kind of squeeze as much as I can out of it. And once it dies, it dies. But for now, it's way more than enough for my dev environment. All right, so the first things that we need to do is we need to set up our new SSD drives and insert them into our server. But obviously, if you look at it, the tray is too big here, and then you have the SAS drive sitting on it. So we have to remove this. But I also got an adapter. So the adapter is basically going to sit something like this in the tray, and the SSD is going to sit right here, so that way when we kind of put it in, it slides in perfectly without leaving any gap, because the SSD obviously is too small, and we need something a little bit big to take up the rest of the space so it can sit perfectly in the tray. So what we're going to do first is we're going to screw the SSD right here so it sits like this, and then this whole thing is going to sit in the tray, and then we're able to slide the tray in. So now we have our SSD sitting in this adapter. So now ideally we should be able to remove this guy and then just sit this right in here, and then we can just slide that right in. these things have seen better days. I've used this for a lot of testing, a lot of learning, a lot of growing, so they've definitely paid their dues. There you go. So now this guy is pretty much steady, right? It looks exactly like a regular hard drive that's mounted on the tray. So now ideally I should be able to just kind of slot this guy right in, I snap it in, and it should be able to get right in there. And now we have a 4 TB SSD. Again, the idea of the SSD is just to make things a little bit faster. We'll take a look at that once we're done, but I'm going to move this aside and I'm going to do it on one more tray because I have two of these, right? So I have two 4 TB. Now we have two SSDs. So I have two SSDs sitting on the tray, looking perfect. So now all we have to do is just slide them in, and two SSDs already. And for these guys, these are pretty straightforward because they're exactly like the SAS drive, the HDD drive, exact same size and all that stuff. So it should be easy to replace. So I don't think we should have problems with those. I mostly wanted to kind of talk about this once because you have to set up an adapter to be able to get these to seat perfectly so you can use them to insert them. All right, so now all we have to do, we have our two space here. All we have to do is be able to insert the tray, the ones that we just changed, into those guys, and then this should fit perfectly to the connector inside of the connector inside of there, and we should have our SSD. So we're gonna slide that in, push it in, lock, that's connected. And then we're gonna do the same for the top one. I'm gonna slide that in. Just gonna make sure I had it right. Slide that in, and then snap. So now we have two SSD. So ideally now we have our OS, our VMOS are going to be running an SSD. Our Proxmox OS is also running an SSD, which keep things really fast. Well, really is a it's an overstatement. Which is going to make things a lot more fast. And now all we have to replace now are these three. So these should be straightforward. We're going to replace them with our, I'm going to remove these. I'm going to replace this three. So two so far. One more, which is the bottom one. We're going to replace this guys with this guys. A lot more newer. This should ideally be good for storage when it comes to VM and application storage. So we have the OS running here, and then we're going to have the application storage and VM data and things like that running on these guys. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and insert them. So this updated one 4 TB as well, and because I don't want an insane amount of storage. It's going to be good enough. I have 3 4 TB, and we'll talk about how I'm going to arrange this in a minute. And I'm going to replace these guys. Let's go ahead and do it. So one of the things to make sure is that you want to make sure you push the drive all the way forward to the point where you can see all 4 of the entry point for the screw. So if you can see on both ends, so you can see all 4 of the entry point. So you have entry point here, entry point here, and entry point here, and entry point here. So you push it all the way back, you don't have enough space up here for the drive to be inserted into the connector. So we've replaced all 3 of the drives. So we have all the 3 updated drives here, and these are all the old ones. I'm gonna put these aside. I might use this on different projects. They're pretty old, but they still works. So I might definitely use them on all projects. So we're gonna go ahead and just insert these guys in. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and insert these guys back in. So we're gonna go ahead with this guy first. Snap that in. All right. Then we're gonna go ahead and snap the top one in as well. Okay, and then the last guy. Snap that guy back in. So now we have 2 SSD, 3 somewhat new drives, and then we have another 3 still the old SAS drive that are just going to be sitting there for like testing things, or maybe I will want to upgrade them later. Just giving myself a little bit of wiggle room here to be able to do that if I need to. So yeah, let's go ahead. Everything is back. I'm just going to go ahead and reconnect this guy. I'm going to reconnect this guy, insert that, and then reconnect it and move that up. And just kind of reconnect that guy back in. Make sure it's reconnected, and then I'll go ahead and cover this guy up. Oh my God. I can't reconnect it kneeling down. And that, okay. And I'm gonna go ahead and cover this guy back up, and then I'm gonna go ahead and insert it, connect everything back, and then boot things up, and hopefully we're able to see all of our, hopefully fingers crossed we don't run into any issue. We're able to see all of the things that we just inserted. I'm gonna go ahead and put this tray back in there. And we're gonna go ahead and cover this bad boy back up. Slide that guy down. Everything is fully back into it. Like I said, this server is not the latest and the greatest server ever, but hey man, it does the work. And for now, it should be able to do all the things that it needs to do. So let's go ahead and mount this guy back up, reconnect everything, and boot it up and see if we're able to see all of our drives, and if we run into any issue that we have to fix. All right, so the server is completely back up and running. I reconnected everything, and everything is back up and running. So as you can see, we have now 3 SSD in total. We have the 2 new SSD that we just set up, 4 TB each, and then we have our old SSD, which is where Proxmox is installed. But also it's 2 TB because this SSD is also going to be used for storing ISO and simple files and things like that. So the only thing that it's going to hold is the Proxmox OS, as well as things like ISO templates, container templates, and things like that. So we have our 2 SSD. We have our 3 Toshiba drives that we just set up. So now we're good to go. And then we have our old guys right here. It even says unknown. Have our old SAS drives right here. But for now, we have everything that we need. So we have our 3 new stuff, and then our 2 new SSD. Now we're ready to start configuring our storage so that we are able to make things just a little bit quicker. Okay, so let's chat a little bit about my storage strategy for this environment, which is the dev environment. My setup is basically going to reflect what we talked about earlier, right? So I've got 8 drive in total. I have 2 4 TB SSD. I have 3 4 TB HDD drive. And the other 3 drives are the old SAS drive. So here's how I'm going to structure things in this environment. I'm mostly going with ZFS since I feel like I've got enough RAM on the server to handle it. The 2 SSDs are going to be configured as ZFS RAID 0. Yes, I know what you're thinking at this point. Which hear me out, which will give me 8 TB to play with for my VM. The only thing that's going to live here are the VM disks themselves. This should ideally make things a lot faster and more responsive when I'm working inside of my VMs. My main goal here is space, like I've said so many times in this whole video. I'm not too worried about redundancy because all of my VM data and the configs will be back up daily. So I just need room to build and test things in the dev environment. Next up are the VM data drive. These are mainly going to store application data for the VM. So when a VM is created, the OS will live on the SSD, while the application data and related files will live on these drive. This keeps things separated, OS data on one pool and application data on another. This will help performance and organization. So for this, I'm going to go with ZFS RAID Z1 across 3 4 TB drives, which will give me about 8 TB of usable space with 1 disk worth of redundancy. The reason for using RAID Z1 here is because this is where my data would live. So I am kind of a little bit cautious, even though this is kind of the dev environment. And I've said so many times the goal here is not to care about redundancy. I am still somewhat cautious when it comes to application data. So I want to be able to say like, hey, if one of my drives fail, I can just replace it. Even though I'm doing backup and all this stuff, I still want the ability to say like, hey, for my application data, because for the VMs, I can just transfer the config, transfer things, and then they're back up and running. But for my application data, for the data part of things, I want to be able to say like, hey, I have some sort of peace of mind that if one of the drives fail, I am able to replace it. Now, if two fail, I don't know what to tell you there. I don't know what to tell myself there, but to be able to have that one drive there is ideal for me, and that's why I'm going with RAID 01 on this one. That leaves me with the last 4 TB drive, the old SAS drive. I'm not doing anything with this just yet. I plan to use them for some upcoming videos on TrueNAS and other storage setup. They will basically be my test drive for things like pass-through and other experiments that I'm going to be working on. It's not a ton of drive, but it's perfect for testing and kind of implementing new concept or being able to create video around new concept that has to do with pass-through and all those other things that I'm thinking about. So I need a little bit of storage there that's not too powerful, not too crazy, but just there to be able to test some of those concepts. And that's what that's going to be there for. I'm not going to touch them right now. They're just going to sit there, and I will use them, well, pretty soon. All right, so these are all the disks that we have in here right now. These are the two SSD. These two SSD are going to be configured as RAID 0, so ZFS RAID 0, those two guys right here, 1 and 2, they're going to be configured as RAID 0. Now, I choose RAID 0 because I want to maximize both performance and capacity. This configuration in itself provides no redundancy, but this is a risk that is acceptable in this environment since all of my virtual machines are going to be backed up regularly. And like I've said several times, my focus for this environment is to be able to have enough space to build out the things that I want to build out and to be able to have enough speed. So when I'm using my VM, they're not too laggy because I'm not expecting it to be extremely fast. Like this is like a top of the line hardware, but I don't want them to be extremely laggy to the point where it becomes frustrating. So having RAID 0 gives me the ability to have 8 TB so I can maximize my SSD, and it allows me to be able to have performance boost as well, right? So that's that's the main reason. Those two reasons are the main reason why I decided to go with RAID 0 for this environment. So we're going to try to configure this as RAID 0. But if we go to disk, so if we go to disk here already in disk, if we go to ZFS, one of the things that you're going to notice is that if we say create ZFS, you're going to notice that the RAID 0 is not available on the list. You can create a single disk, but if you were to select single disk and then just go down here and select this 2, and then call this whatever you want, right? And then click create. Proxmox is going to tell you that no, you only have to select one. So there is no RAID 0. So there's RAID 10, RAID Z, you have RAID Z2, and then RAID Z3, and then you have the D RAIDs and all that stuff. So there's no RAID 0. For us to be able to configure RAID 0, we have to do it in the shell. But the first thing that we need to do is we need to go back to our disk and we need to take a look at our disk name here. This is very important. So we need to look at the device location here, the device mounted point location here. So it's dev SDE and then is dev SDF. So make sure you make note of these two things right here because we're going to need it when we're creating our ZFS pool for this 2 drive right here. So now what we want to do is we want to go to shell. And once we're in shell, if you were to say zpo status, we're going to see all, status, we're going to see all of the ZFS pool that we currently have configured for this server. And we only have one right now, and that's just the main hard drive, because configure ZFS, and this is the SSD that is set up for that, and that's the SSD that's running Proxmox. So for us to be able to create a new ZFS pool, what we want to do is we want to run a command like this that's going to allow us to be able to create the pool and tell the pool or tell Proxmox what are the drives that we want to be included in that pool. So it's something like zpool. So zpool create, and then the pool name for the VM drive, or for the VM storage, I'm going to say VM OS underscore data. And then I'm going to grab the two drives here that I want to include, and this is the reason why you needed to kind of make note of those drives. So these are the drives. So the first one is dev SDF, and then the second one is dev SDE. So these are the ones that you needed to make note of. So basically what we're doing here, um, we're saying zpoll, and then we're saying create te CREATE there. And then we're saying this is what we want to call our ZFS pool. And these are the two drives that we want to add to our pool. So if we click enter, it's going to go ahead and create that pool. So now if we go back and then run ZFS status, you're going to see that now we have two pools in there. We have the one that we just created and the one that was already there, right? So this is the default pool and this is the one that we just created. Now, if we go back to ZFS here, we can see that that pool has been created, but we can see that on this side right here, on the left-hand side right here on storage, we're not able to see that pool. And ideally, we would like to be able to see that pool, right? So when you create RAID 0, Proxmox doesn't automatically just add it to the GUI. A lot of the RAID level that they have for you here, you will notice that these are RAID level that allow you to have some sort of redundancy. It's like for single disk, mirror, RAID 10, RAID Z, all of this allow you to have some sort of redundancy. So when it comes to like creating ZFS pool RAID 0, Proxmox is kind of hiding it a little bit. I won't call it hide, but they kind of hide it behind the shell a little bit because they're assuming that, hey, if you really want to create something that have no redundancy, you should be a professional that is aware of what they're creating. So you should be able to use the shell. It's kind of like an extra layer of caution for people not to automatically create something that have no redundancy. But in my case, it makes sense in this environment. So that's why I created it. But that's beside the point. If we go to data center here, you're going to notice that it's not here. That's because we have to add it. So to add it, we're going to go to data center. We're going to go to add. We're going to go to ZFS, and then we're going to click on the drop down. And because we created this pool, you can see that that pool is available for us to select, right? So we're going to say VMOS data. I kind of blank out there for a second. We're going to select our pool that we just created. It's our VMOS and it's underscore data because this is our VMOS is going to leave. And we're going to call it the same exact thing. So we're going to say VMOS underscore DATA. Right. And then we're going to select, obviously, there's only two things that can be included in this pool, because it's block storage, so that's perfectly fine. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that ZFS is already thin provisioned by default, but the space is not reported correctly to Proxmox. It only sees the space assigned to the VM, and I'm going to check this box. So I'm checking the thin provision box here because it tells the virtualization layer that ZFS allocates space dynamically, preventing Proxmox from over-reserving or misreporting storage. Because if we don't check this, right, Proxmox will assume all space is fully allocated and may show less free space than actually available. So I'm actually just checking this to make sure that Proxmox report the correct space, and it kind of have that thin provision feel to it as well, right? Because ZFS is already thin provision. So we just want Proxmox to know, like, hey, report the correct size that is being used or that's allocated. So we want to make sure we check that box. There we go. This is completely set up. We just want to click on add. And now our VM OS data storage should now be added. So now if we go to this storage right here, it's going to load and it's going to tell us that, like, hey, you have about 7.8 TB storage available to be used. And this is going to be used for our VM disk and our CT container volume. So this is perfect. This is exactly what we want. We have 8 TB. We're going to be able to use it. We were able to use that performance boost that we needed. We were able to get that performance boost that we needed. We're able to get a lot of storage to be able to build, and we're able to do the things that we need to do. Now, for those 3 drives, the way that we're going to set them up is that we're going to use RAID C1, right? So we're going to do ZFS RAID C1, and the concept is pretty much the same here. There's a bit of redundancy here. So this drive or this data storage or this storage is going to be used inside of the VMs as secondary disk, like NFC shares, app data, application data, log, upload. This is going to be the persistent storage to be used on the server. So for the SSDs, the SSDs are only going to hold the VMOS data, and then this storage are going to be able to hold all of the data that are going to apply to those VM. We just wanted to separate the two, so we have that sense of separation between the two. So I don't use all of my SSDs. I have something for just the OS, and I have something for just the data. So with that, we're going to use RAID Z1. It provides balance between kind of performance, capacity, and it provides redundancy as well. And like I said before, I'm a little bit okay with losing one of my drives. So one of these drives is going to be lost. So it kind of sits there to allow to have like a one drive failure. So if one of my drives fail, I can just pop in a new one and this should be good to go. We're going to go ahead and go to ZFS. We should be able to create RAID Z1 in the GUI without us having to do it in the shell. So we're going to go ahead and click create. We're going to say RAID Z. So this is RAID Z1. And we're going to select our 3 drives right here. We are going to, but this guy right here, we're going to say LZ4 because it's just a lot more faster for compressing and decompressing things. So I'm going to select that. For the name, I'm going to call it something similar. So it's going to be VM underscore app data. All right, so that's perfect. Kind of define what the storage is going to be used for. So I have 3 here. I have RAID Z1 or in Proxmox RAID Z. I have my compression level set up. I have my A shift level set up. So that's perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create, and it's going to go ahead and create that storage for us. And since this is created on the GUI, we should be able to see it on the side once it's done. So there you go. So now that guy is created as well. So we have this guy, VM CT volume, and then we have VM disk, and we also have our VM data. This is going to be used for VM data, and this is going to be used for um, VM OS, so VM OS data. So if we click on that or click on summary, it's going to tell us that like, hey, you have 8 TB. So you notice that we use 4 TB. So we lose in one drive, we have 8 TB. But again, the idea here is since the data, a lot of the things that I'm going to work on, the data is going to be living here. It gives us that flexibility to be able to say like, hey, if something goes wrong, we can just with the hard drive, with the hardware, we can just say like, hey, let's try to see if we're going to replace one of those drives. Now, if 2 fails, then we're just going to cross our finger and hope 2 don't fail. But again, things are being backed up, so I'm not too worried about that. But just wanted a bit of redundancy here. So yeah, so now everything is good to go. We have both of our drives kind of set up. Now, if we go back to our node here, we go to disk. We have 2 drives that are still not being used. So I'm just going to minimize some of this so we can take a look at that. So we know that all of 3 of our Toshiba drives are not being used. All 2 of our SSD are not being used. And now we can see that these guys right here, these ones that are not partitioned, they're not being used. But again, I'm going to leave these alone for now. I can either use this to test some concept, test some pass-through, test a whole bunch of stuff. Proxmox is able to see a lot of drives now, so I can set up a lot of things here that I'm thinking about in terms of like testing a lot of concept. I might change some of those drives later on down the line and then add some more storage there. So I'm just leaving these for now. And with these guys right here, with this 2 storage that I just set up, so VM OS data and then VM app data, should be able to carry me along for a lot of the setup and a lot of the things that I'm thinking about to set up in this environment. And of course, if I want to store things like, let's say, storage, VM, like, sorry, ISO, CT template, as you can see, it's already there. So all of these things are going to be stored on this local storage here, which is basically, if we go back here, which is basically the 2 TB drive right here. And the reason again why I choose 2 TB is so that I'm able to do that. Some of it is allocated to Proxmox OS, and then the rest of it can be used to things like that are not too heavy at all. They're just sitting there. They don't require a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to go ahead and try to see if we can, because we're already connected to our backup server, we're going to try to see if we can restore one of our VM to the new drives that we just created. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to see if we're going to restore some of our containers, or at least one of our containers in our VMs, so that they can start being placed in this new storage that we just created. So if we go over here, we can see that we have our resources. This is still pointing to the old storage. And if we go to our snapshots here, you can see it's already telling us that, like, hey, this storage doesn't exist anymore, and this snapshots is still pointing to our old storage. So what we want to do is, first we want to clean things up a little bit, because again, if we go back to this guy right here, I'm going to get rid of that. If we go here, we can see that we already have a backup for this guy. But if I try to restore this right now, it's going to fail, because we still have these. If I go back here, go back here, go back here, we still have this thing pointing to this guy. And if we go back to the snapshot, we have this pointing to the old storage. And it's going to fail if we try to restore. Actually, let me try that so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. So if I go here and then try to restore, perfectly fine. We tell it, like, hey, we want it to be restored on our new storage here. Click restore. Click yes. It's going to tell us, like, hey, it's going to fail. It's going to error out, and it's going to tell us that, like, hey, that storage doesn't exist anymore. That's perfectly fine. So what we want to do, since we have a full backup of the VM, we're not going to lose anything if we completely just detach things from the storage. If we just remove this guys right here from the storage. But even if I try to do it in the GUI right now, so if I click on edit, it's not letting me. If I go to here and I click on move storage, so I click on move storage and I click on move it to the VM OS data, try it again. All right, it's giving me an error. It's telling me, like, hey, it doesn't exist, right? You can't move it, which is perfectly fine. So now what we want to do is we want to do some cleanup real quick before we can restore our snapshot, which is this backup. There's just this guy right here. What we want to do is we want to go into the config for this particular VM and then clean some things up so we can do the restoration without going through that issue. And it's a bit of a pain, but this is something that you might need to do when you kind of change storage around. Another way to do it as well is to make sure that you kind of leave that old storage and maybe leave that old storage intact, create a new storage, and then transfer your data. You can do it that way too, but it depends on, like, how many storage you have. Can you leave that on while you replace the other storage or add new storage? So there's a bit of factor to it, right? So what we want to do, and if you want to see how to kind of back up your config, do all of these things, I just created a video for that, so you can go check that out as well. I created a video for that last week, so you can go check that out as well. So what we want to do is we want to go to CD, ATC, PVE, and then we're going to do ls here. We're going to cd into this, where is it, this guy right here, because this is where all of our LXC config for our VMs live. So we're going to cd LXC, and then we're going to do ls, and then we want to look at this config and then remove all of the unneeded space, unneeded snapshots and things like that from this guy right here. Now, be mindful, right? Before you start restoring things, before you start not restoring, but before you start transferring storage and things like that, if you have a snapshots that you need, make sure you back those up, right? If you have specific things that you need, make sure you back those up as well before you transfer things over or before you destroy your storage. Because once you remove those backup, you're not going to get them anymore. Those snapshots, you're not going to get them anymore. But in my case, I have a backup of the VM. I don't necessarily need the snapshots anymore. So I'm going to remove all of those. So now what I want to do is I want to say nano, and I want to say 100.config here. All right. And these are all the configuration for our VM. So as you can see, we have two backups here, right? So what I want to do is I want to remove all of these backup here. I want to remove them because, again, you can also just remove the storage, but in my case, again, I don't need these snapshots anymore. So I'm going to remove all of the snapshots, and I'm going to remove the storage on the main config for that particular storage is already attached. So as you can see, you have this storage right here, and that was the case for the other one that I just deleted as well. It says sandbox_01, but again, that storage doesn't exist anymore because that's the storage that we had to destroy to be able to replace the drive and create the storage. So we're going to go ahead and just remove everything here. Just keep removing that, remove all of this, guys. So now all of the storage, all of the snapshots are pretty much gone. And we also want to remove this guy as well. So we want to remove this because, again, this is sandbox 1. It doesn't exist anymore. And don't worry too much about this because, again, you're going to restore your data. So all of your data are going to be in place. So now we've removed all reference of that snapshots, of that storage. So we're going to click Control X here, Y, enter. And then now, if we go back to our VM, right, it shouldn't give us that error anymore. So this is completely cleaned out, right? And then if we go to our resource, now the root disk is also completely cleaned out. Ideally, if we're going out to backup and then we say restore, we should be able to restore it to our new storage with no issue, because again, there's nothing attached to it, and this is going to wipe out whatever config, and it's going to install all of those new config on the new storage. So if I go here and it says start on start after restore, click restore, say yes, and it's telling you here, right? It's telling you that like it's going to erase current CT data, which is perfectly fine. Click yes, and it's going to go through. Now you see it's not failing anymore. It's going to go through and then try to do the restoration. I might take a few, and then once it's done, we're going to take a look at our storage and see if we're able to get into the VM as well. So let's just give it a few seconds and it should be back up and running. Okay, yeah, I guess that wasn't that long. So you say task is okay, so our restore is done. So if we go in here now, we'll go back to resource. We can see now that our data is leaving on our new storage. No snapshots because we didn't take any backup of our snapshots. If we go to our storage, we can see now that our container volume is now living here. Now, if we go to our container and we'll go to console, we can see that our container is ready to be logged into. And this is our DNS that we've been testing on, the DNS that we created a couple of videos ago. So we'll go to root here and then log in. All right, and now we're logged in. If we go to CD, ATC, we just want to make sure all of our configs are there. Bind. And then ls, we can see that all of our config, all of the things that we've been working on, all is still there. We didn't lose anything, but we're able to upgrade our drive and be able to move everything over. So if I cd or nano, for example, into, let's say we just worked on the db quiet engineer. Let's look at that. There you go. All of our config is still in there exactly the way we left it, and everything is good to go. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We were able to update our drive. So now our VM are going to be leaving on an SSD storage. It's going to make it a little bit fast, a little bit snappy. We're able to restore our VMs. Now I'm going to have to go through and then clean up some of these things and then do some restoration. But yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, so that is it, ladies and gentlemen. These changes should make things a bit smoother when it comes to running my VMs. It's not going to be lightning fast or super crazy or anything like that, but it'll be good enough to keep things running effectively in my dev environment. Like I mentioned earlier, the server isn't brand new or rocking the latest and greatest hardware, but for now, it's modern enough for what I am planning to do or what I'm doing. And I'm hoping these tweaks make everything run just a little better overall. Thanks for watching as always. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And please don't forget to check out my newsletter. Link is in the description box below. Make sure you go subscribe. I'm cooking up some really good stuff and they're coming soon. And as always, stay geeking, stay curious, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.